Michael Thornton was a reasonable man. At least that's what he'd always believed about himself. He paid his taxes on time, kept his lawn neatly trimmed, and always, without fail, picked up after his 3-year-old beagle, Winston. Michael had moved into the Pleasant Pines subdivision in Maplewood 18 months ago, seeking peace after his divorce. For the most part, he found it, until Karen Wilkins moved in next door. The first knock on his door came at 7:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. Michael remembered the time precisely because he just settled into his favorite armchair with a glass of scotch, ready to watch the baseball game he'd recorded. "Your dog has been barking for over an hour," said the woman standing on his doorstep. She wore a pink cardigan despite the summer heat, her blonde hair cut in what Michael's ex-wife would have called a "can I speak to the manager bob." "Some of us are trying to enjoy a quiet evening." Michael blinked, momentarily confused. "Winston? He's been napping beside me all afternoon. He hasn't made a sound." The woman, who hadn't bothered to introduce herself, narrowed her eyes. "I know what I heard. Please control your animal or I'll be forced to file a noise complaint." Before Michael could respond, she turned on her heel and marched back to the house on his right, where she'd moved in just 3 weeks prior. That was his first encounter with Karen Wilkins. It wouldn't be his last. By the end of the month, Michael had received 2 written warnings from the Homeowners Association. By the end of the second month, he'd been summoned to an HOA disciplinary meeting where he tried, increasingly frustrated, to explain that Winston was possibly the quietest beagle in existence. The dog had been trained by Michael's ex-father-in-law, a professional handler who'd worked with service animals. Winston barked only when absolutely necessary, like when the mail carrier approached or when he needed to go outside urgently. "Perhaps you don't hear it because you're at work," Karen suggested during the meeting, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Your dog howls all day long. I work from home, so I hear everything." Michael had installed a pet camera after the first complaint. "I have footage showing he sleeps most of the day," he countered, pulling up the app on his phone. "He might bark once or twice when someone passes the house, but that's it." The HOA president, a harried-looking man named Dave, glanced at the footage and then at the stack of complaints Karen had filed. "Ms. Wilkins has submitted quite detailed logs of the disturbances. Because they're made up," Michael said, his patience wearing thin. Karen gasped dramatically. "Are you calling me a liar?" The meeting ended with another warning for Michael and a suggestion that he consider bark control solutions. He left seething, Winston's leash clutched tightly in his hand. That night, as he sat on his back porch, watching Winston sniff contentedly around the yard, Michael overheard Karen on her own patio talking loudly on her phone. "I can't stand dog people," she was saying. "They think their precious pets should be allowed to disturb everyone. Well, I've dealt with neighbors like this before. Trust me, either that dog goes or he does." Michael felt a chill despite the warm evening air. Winston trotted over and placed his head on Michael's knee, brown eyes looking up with complete trust. Michael scratched behind the dog's ears, a plan already forming in his mind. If Karen Wilkins wanted noise, he would give her noise. But first, he needed to understand what he was really dealing with and why she seemed determined to drive him out of his A. The following Saturday morning, Michael decided to conduct an experiment. He set up his phone to record in Winston's favorite spot by the window, packed a small cooler with sandwiches and drinks, then loaded the beagle into his car. They spent the entire day at Riverside Park, hiking trails and lounging by the water. Winston, delighted by the adventure, chased squirrels and charmed every passerby with his gentle demeanor. When they returned home just after sunset, Michael was greeted by a note taped to his door. Another HOA violation, this one threatening a $250 fine for continuous dog barking between 10:30 a.m. and 3:45 p.m. The timestamps were oddly specific. Michael yanked the notice down and walked straight to Karen's front door. He knocked firmly, Winston sitting obediently at his side. "Yes?" Karen answered the door with a tight smile that vanished when she saw Winston. She took a dramatic step backward. "Keep that animal away from me." "Winston and I have been at the park all day," Michael said, holding up the HOA notice. "Yet somehow you heard him barking while we were 5 miles away. Care to explain that?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps it was another dog you're hiding, or perhaps you're lying about where you were. I have timestamped photos, video, and witnesses, and my security camera will confirm we weren't home during those hours." For a brief moment, Karen's composure slipped. "Well, I heard a dog barking. If it wasn't yours, then one of the other neighbors needs to control their pet." She started to close the door. "I'm not discussing this further." Michael wedged his foot in the doorway. "Why are you doing this? What did I ever do to you?" "Remove your foot immediately or I'm calling the police." Karen's voice had taken on a shrill quality. "And get that mutt off my property." "Winston is a purebred beagle, not a mutt," Michael said, but he stepped back and removed his foot. "And this isn't over." Back home, Michael downloaded the footage from his pet camera. As expected, the house had been empty all day. He forwarded the video to the HOA president along with his timestamped park photos. Then he poured himself a generous scotch and began researching Karen Wilkins online. An hour later, Michael sat back in his chair, a complex picture emerging. Karen had lived in 3 different neighborhoods in the past 5 years. Each time, she moved after disputes with neighbors that had escalated to HOA hearings or even court cases. In her previous community, she'd successfully forced an elderly couple to rehome their golden retriever after months of noise complaints, despite multiple neighbors testifying they rarely heard the dog. Most interestingly, in each case, Karen had eventually acquired the disputed property next door to her at significantly below market value. The pattern was unmistakable. "She's trying to drive me out so she can buy my house cheap," Michael murmured to Winston, who had settled on the couch beside him. Real estate speculation through harassment. The next morning, Michael crossed paths with Dave, the HOA president, who was walking his own dog, a fluffy Pomeranian that yapped continuously as they approached. "I got your email," Dave said, looking uncomfortable. "Look, Michael, I believe you weren't home yesterday, but the board's hands are tied. We have to investigate every complaint, even when they're clearly fabricated," Michael asked. Dave lowered his voice. "Between us, Karen's complaints seem excessive, but she knows the HOA bylaws better than the people who wrote them, and she's threatening to sue the association if we come enforce the noise regulations." "She's done this before," Michael said. "I found cases from her previous neighborhoods." Dave nodded grimly. "I suspected as much. But unless we catch her in an obvious lie, there's not much we can do." As they parted ways, Michael felt a renewed determination. Karen Wilkins had picked the wrong neighbor this time. He wasn't some retiree who would be easily intimidated, nor was he wealthy enough to simply move away. This was his home, Winston's home, and he would defend it. That afternoon, Michael made 2 important phone calls. The first was to his cousin Jenny, who worked as a real estate attorney. The second was to his old college roommate Darius, who had built a successful career as an audio engineer for rock concerts. "I need some advice on noise ordinances," he told Darius. "Specifically, I need to know exactly how loud I can legally be and when." Darius laughed. "Man, are you planning some kind of revenge concert? Because if so, I want front row seats." "Something like that," Michael replied, scratching Winston behind the ears as a plan began taking concrete shape in his mind. "Let's just say I'm about to give a certain neighbor a taste of her own medicine," with interest. By Wednesday afternoon, Michael's living room had been transformed into a command center. His coffee table was covered with printouts of local noise ordinances, HOA bylaws, and a detailed calendar of Karen's comings and goings that he compiled over the past week. Winston observed the operation from his bed in the corner, head tilted curiously at his owner's unusual behavior. "The key is timing and precision," Michael explained to his cousin Jenny, who sat across from him taking notes. "Karen leaves for her yoga class every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m. sharp. She has standing hair appointments on Friday afternoons, and she hosts what she calls Wine Circle for her friends every second Saturday." Jenny raised an eyebrow. "You've been busy. Is this what divorced men do with their free time now?" "Only the ones being systematically harassed," Michael replied. "Look at this." He pulled up an email on his laptop. "Dave from the HOA forwarded me Karen's latest complaint. She claims Winston was howling incessantly yesterday from 2 to 4 p.m. "And you have proof that's not true?" Michael nodded. "Winston and I were at the vet for his annual checkup. I have timestamp receipts, and the office has security cameras. But that's not the point anymore. Even when I prove her wrong, she just makes up new complaints. So what's the actual plan here? You mentioned something about making noise." Michael's phone buzzed with a text. "That's Darius. He's here with the equipment." They walk outside to find a pickup truck backing into Michael's driveway. Darius, a tall man with dreadlocks pulled back in a ponytail, hopped out and opened the truck bed to reveal several large cases. "As requested," Darius announced, "one completely legal, permit-approved sound system. I've got speakers, amplifiers, mixers, the works." Karen's curtains twitched. Seconds later, she emerged from her front door, smartphone already in hand. "Excuse me," she called, marching toward them. "What's going on here? Are you planning some kind of party?" Michael turned with a pleasant smile. "Good afternoon, Karen. This is my cousin Jenny, who's an attorney, and my friend Darius, an audio engineer. We're just setting up for a little project." Karen's eyes darted between the 3 of them, minting the equipment. "What kind of project requires professional sound equipment? This is a quiet residential neighborhood." "Oh, I'm well aware of the noise restrictions," Michael said. "In fact, I've become something of an expert recently. Did you know that our municipal code allows for noise up to 70 decibels between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. on weekdays? That's about as loud as a vacuum cleaner." Karen's face flushed slightly. "Whatever you're planning is completely within my rights," Jenny interjected smoothly. As Michael's legal counsel, I've reviewed all relevant ordinances and HOA bylaws. Everything we're doing here is perfectly legal. Legal counsel, Karen sputtered. You're going to need more than that if you disturb the peace. Darius chuckled as he lifted his speaker from the truck. Peace has already been disturbed from what I hear. Phantom dog barking tends to do that. Karen's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you think you're doing, but I'll be documenting everything. One violation and I'll have the HOA and the police here so fast. That's actually an excellent idea, Michael said. Document everything. In fact, let me give you a heads up on our schedule. Tomorrow we'll be conducting sound tests between 2 and 4 p.m. Completely within noise ordinance limits, of course. Those are my conference call hours, Karen protested. Michael feigned surprise. Are they? What a coincidence. That's exactly when Winston supposedly howls every day according to your complaints. He shrugged. But since we both know Winston doesn't actually bark during those hours, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Karen stood speechless for a moment, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, she turned on her heel and stalked back to her house, phone already at her ear. The next day at precisely 2 p.m., Michael stood in his backyard with a decibel meter app open on his phone. Darius had set up 2 weatherproof speakers on Michael's patio, angled strategically toward the fence separating his property from Karen's. Jenny sat at the patio table with her laptop open, a copy of the local noise ordinances displayed on the screen. Everything's ready, Darius said, adjusting the final connections on his mixing board. What's our soundtrack for today's festivities? Michael smiled. I'd given this a lot of thought. Karen claims she hears a dog barking, so let's give her exactly what she's been reporting. He handed Darius a USB drive. A compilation of different dog barks, beagles, retrievers, German shepherds, chihuahuas, all recorded at exactly 69 decibels, just under the legal limit. Winston, who had been watching the proceedings with interest, perked up his ears at the mention of other dogs. Don't worry, buddy, Michael assured him, patting the beagle's head. You don't have to make a sound. Your barking stunt doubles will handle everything. Right on cue, Karen appeared on her patio, cell phone in one hand and what appeared to be a video camera in the other. She made a show of setting up the camera on a tripod pointed directly at Michael's yard. Good afternoon, Karen, Michael called cheerfully. Beautiful day, isn't it? Karen didn't respond, adjusting her equipment with deliberate movements. Michael nodded to Darius. Let's begin. With the press of a button, the sound of a single beagle howl, long, melodious, and precisely 69 decibels, filled the air. Winston's head tilted in confusion, looking around for the phantom dog. The howl repeated, then transitioned into a sequence of sharp barks, followed by the deeper woofs of a larger breed. The medley of dog sounds continued, each one carefully calibrated to stay just within legal limits. Karen immediately began recording with both her phone and the camera. This is harassment, she shouted over the barking. I'm calling the police. Please do, Jenny called back pleasantly. We'd be happy to show them our decibel readings and permits. Michael kept his eyes on his phone app, monitoring the noise levels. 68.5 decibels from your property line, Karen. That's 1.5 decibels under the legal limit. We're being good neighbors. 20 minutes into the K9 concert, a police cruiser pulled up in front of Karen's house. Officer Rodriguez, a familiar face in the neighborhood who often stopped by the local park where Michael walked, Winston, approached with a resigned expression. Karen rushed to meet him, talking rapidly and gesturing toward Michael's yard. Officer Rodriguez nodded patiently, then made his way to Michael's fence. Afternoon, Michael, he said. Got a complaint about excessive noise. Mind if I come in to check it out? Not at all, Michael replied, opening his gate. We're conducting a sound test well within municipal guidelines. My attorney cousin is here to ensure we're in compliance. Officer Rodriguez nodded to Jenny, then took out his own decibel meter. After taking several readings from different points in the yard, he confirmed Michael's measurements. Technically, you're within limits, he said. But I have to ask, what's the purpose of playing dog barking sounds in your backyard? Educational demonstration, Michael explained. My neighbor has filed multiple noise complaints about my beagle barking at these exact hours, despite evidence that he's either silent or not even home during those times. He gestured to Winston, who was now napping peacefully under the patio table despite the barking soundtrack. I'm simply providing an audio reference for what actual dog barking at the maximum legal volume sounds like. Officer Rodriguez's lips twitched slightly. I see. And how long is this educational demonstration scheduled to last? Today's session will conclude at 4 p.m., Jenny interjected. Precisely the hours mentioned in Ms. Wilkins' most recent complaint about Winston's allegedly disruptive behavior. The officer looked between Michael's calm demeanor and Karen's increasingly agitated state at the fence line. While you're within your rights, I'd ank. The next morning, Michael woke to the sound of hammering. He checked his bedside clock, 6:42 a.m., exactly 18 minutes before the noise ordinance kicked in at 7 a.m. Karen was nothing if not precise in her antagonism. Michael peered out his window to see Karen in her backyard methodically hammering what appeared to be fence posts along their shared property line. Winston hopped up on the windowsill beside him, tilting his head at the commotion. "She's building a spite fence," Michael muttered. Classic move. By the time Michael had showered and made coffee, Dave from the HOA was standing on his front porch looking harried. "It's not even 8 a.m., Dave," Michael said as he opened the door. "What's the emergency?" Dave held up a stack of papers. "Karen filed these at 7:01 this morning. A formal complaint about yesterday's noise disturbance, a request for an emergency HOA board meeting, and a petition she apparently got several neighbors to sign overnight." Michael accepted the papers and flipped through them. "Let me guess. The petition claims Winston is a neighborhood menace?" "Not exactly. It's about you now. It says you're deliberately creating a hostile living environment and destroying property values with your aggressive audio harassment campaign." Dave rubbed his temples. "Michael, I understand why you're doing this, but the board is getting pressure from multiple homeowners now. Did Karen happen to mention she's building an unauthorized fence on our property line as we speak?" Dave sighed. "She filed for emergency approval this morning. Claims it's for safety concerns regarding aggressive animals." Michael laughed incredulously. "You met Winston. He's afraid of butterflies." "I know. Look, I've done some digging into Karen's history with previous HOAs. You're right about her pattern of driving neighbors out. But she's very good at working within the system while pushing others to snap." Dave lowered his voice. "Several of her previous neighbors ended up with restraining orders or property lines after they reacted poorly to her provocations." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "So she's hoping I'll lose my cool, do something illegal, and then she can swoop in and buy my devalued property." "Exactly. The board meeting is set for tomorrow evening. I'd suggest toning down whatever you have planned for today." "I appreciate the advice," Michael said, "but I've done nothing outside the rules. Unlike Karen, I'm not filing false reports or building unauthorized structures." After Dave left, Michael called Jenny to update her. Then he texted Darius. "Change of plans. Need the equipment at 7 a.m. tomorrow instead of 2 p.m. today. Bring coffee." Throughout the day, Michael observed Karen's fence taking shape, a 6-foot privacy barrier that extended just along their shared boundary, stopping precisely at the property line markers. She had clearly rushed the job, hiring workers who completed the basic structure by late afternoon. Michael spent the evening researching HOA bylaws regarding fences and property modifications. Around midnight, he received an email from Jenny with several legal precedents attached and a simple message. "You're going to enjoy this." At 6:30 a.m., Darius arrived with the sound equipment and a tray of coffee. "Man, this is early even for a sound check," he grumbled. "This better be good." "Trust me," Michael replied, helping unload the speakers. "Karen's in for a surprise." They positioned the speakers differently today, facing upward at a 45-degree angle from Michael's side of the yard, carefully arranged to project sound over the top of Karen's new fence. At precisely 7 a.m., Michael nodded to Darius, who pressed play on his equipment. The sound that filled the air wasn't dog barking this time. Instead, it was the clear, unmistakable recitation of the Pleasant Pines HOA bylaws, read in a pleasant female voice. The Pleasant Pines HOA typically held its meetings in the community center's modest conference room. Tonight, however, they'd been forced to relocate to the main hall to accommodate the unprecedented turnout. Michael arrived 15 minutes early to find nearly 40 residents already seated, an extraordinary showing for a neighborhood of 68 homes. "Quite the crowd," Jenny murmured as they found seats near the front. Winston trotted alongside them, wearing a small bandana that read, "Quiet Dog" in bold letters. Darius' idea of subtle theater. "Word travels fast," Michael replied, nodding to several neighbors who offered supportive smiles. "Karen's been calling everyone she knows." "So have you, apparently," Jenny said, gesturing to the gathering. "Mrs. Chen has been busy." Indeed, Mrs. Chen had taken it upon herself to organize what she called Team Winston after witnessing the morning's events. She sat in the center of a group of elderly residents, all wearing small beagle pins that Michael suspected hadn't existed before today. At precisely 7 p.m., Dave called the meeting to order, looking both exhausted and mildly surprised at the attendance. Karen sat in the front row opposite Michael, a thick binder of documents on her lap and a professionally printed poster board leaning against her chair. The poster showed a timeline labeled Noise Disturbance CES, with dates highlighted in alarming red. "Before we begin," Dave announced, "I'd like to remind everyone that HOA meetings are conducted according to Robert's Rules of Order. Everyone will have a chance to speak, but please wait to be recognized." Karen's hand shot up immediately. Dave sighed. Yes, Ms. Wilkins. Karen stood, smoothing her immaculate pantsuit. Given the urgent nature of the situation, I request the board address my petition first. She held up a document. I have 26 signatures from homeowners concerned about the hostile living environment being created by Mr. Thornton's aggressive sound campaign. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ms. Wilkins, Dave began, we have several items on the agenda, including my complaint about an unauthorized fence construction, Michael interjected calmly, which seems particularly relevant given that it violates no fewer than 7 HOA bylaws. Karen's face flushed. That fence was necessary for my safety. His dog is unstable and aggressive. A soft collective gasp rose from the assembly. Mrs. Chen's Team Winston members looked particularly offended. Perhaps, Dave suggested carefully, we should address both matters since they appear to be connected. Ms. Wilkins, you filed the initial complaints about Mr. Thornton's dogs, so you have the floor first. For the next 20 minutes, Karen presented what Michael had to admit was an impressive case, if all of it had been true. She displayed charts of barking incidents, time-stamped recordings that somehow captured dog noises from days when Winston wasn't even home, and testimonials she claimed were from anonymous neighbors afraid to speak publicly. And now, she continued, her voice rising dramatically, Mr. Thornton has embarked on a campaign of revenge, blasting disruptive sounds directly at my property, deliberately scheduled during my work calls and meetings. Dave nodded. Thank you, Ms. Wilkins. Mr. Thornton, your response? Michael approached the front, Winston following obediently at his heel. He placed a single USB drive on the table. This contains security footage from my home showing Winston's actual behavior during every single incident Ms. Wilkins has reported, Michael explained. It also includes documentation of my whereabouts during times when she claimed my dog was barking while I wasn't home. He turned to face the room. But more importantly, I'd like to address the community directly. Many of you have lived beside me for over a year. Some of you, like Mrs. Chen and Mr. Patel, walk past my house daily. Has anyone here, anyone at all, ever had an issue with Winston barking excessively?